All right, welcome everybody to this week's Take Charge of Your Life discussion. This is discussion 3. We're here to talk about how to live healthy, live empowered, and live free, which is our version of mind, body, and soul. I'm Tish Taylor from Growth Centric Living. I'm a mindset trainer and a personal transformation guide, and this is my co-host, Roberta.
Hi, I'm Roberta from Wake Up to Life Wellness, and I, focus on total transformation in mind, body, and soul as a holistic health practitioner and a personal transformation specialist.
We are both elite mentorship trainers, certified trainers, I should say, under our mentor, Peter Sage. For those of you that aren't aware, he is a world-renowned behavior expert, TED Talk speaker, and a best-selling author. And our plan here in our live discussions is to show you a clip from him, a teaching from him, and then we're going to discuss it in our 3 categories and hopefully provide you guys with some value on how to live healthy, live empowered, and live free.
Excellent. Yeah, our reel today with Peter Sage is called The 3 Stages of Understanding.
Why do people know what to do but don't do what they know? It's because one of the biggest mistakes in education and personal growth is that people confuse intellectual levels of understanding with thinking they know something and therefore it'll change their behavior. And it doesn't. See, smokers know they shouldn't smoke, but it doesn't stop them from smoking. Instead, you need to be able to move from an intellectual level of awareness and understanding into an emotional level, which means that, oh my God, now I feel the truth of what it is, and it's far harder to ignore that or self-justify against it. Now, if you really want to take transformation further and have permanent lasting change based upon what you know, you go from an intellectual understanding to an emotional understanding to a sense where it's part of your identity. Now, I know I shouldn't smoke, but I still do, to, wow, I know I've got to stop now, to, I'm a non-smoker.
All right, so sort of to recap, Peter's talking about how we go from something we want to learn, a change that we want to make in our life, how we go from a level 1 understanding of just knowing that this thing exists, all the way to embodying it into real transformation and real change, which is level 3, and making that our identity. There is a step in between there that normally includes an emotional attachment. So level 1, knowing something. Level 2, having an emotional attachment for your purpose for this change. And then level 3, though, is really embodying this change so that it becomes your identity. It becomes part of who you are. So I'm sure there is a lot of us. I definitely have been guilty of this over the years, where I start at a level of knowing I should do something. I know all about all of the healthy habits and things that are good for me, but I don't necessarily do them. Now that I have this sort of education, I am much more aware about how to intentionally make change. Especially in the areas of personal development in trying to improve our lives.
Yeah, I think the biggest factor in our culture today is having tons of information and thinking that that's going to take us to the next level. So we invest a lot of money and time and energy into learning things and signing up for more programs, and it's just total overwhelm, but not application. And so knowing these 3 levels of understanding, these 3 stages of understanding, it'll just help us to start thinking more on how can we make this a part of who we are, and really then feel proud of ourselves and our life, knowing that we have made those changes. Because otherwise we kind of get in a cycle of self-judgment and condemning ourselves, and it can almost be a trigger then when someone offers a change. It's almost like you already believe I'm not going to be able to do that, and I don't want to put myself into that feeling of being, like not good enough or a failure, so I'm not even going to attempt. So we can kind of get ourselves backed into a corner, so to speak, on what true change needs to happen in our life so that we can live an abundant life. And then we kind of talk ourselves out of it and say, well, that's really not for me. I don't get to have that version of life. But with these, a new framework, a new mindset, and these new understandings, we'll have this path that we carve out that starts taking us to that lasting change, not something we just learn about and then go home and forget about.
That allows us huge awareness. And I like what you said there, and especially in talking about our first category there, living empowered, right? The thoughts that you have and the vocabulary that we use around change and what our intentions are make a significant difference.
Yeah, I think when it comes to mindset, like Peter said in his reel, knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. So again, getting all that intellectual understanding, and then kind of walking away from it all, maybe too overwhelmed or like thinking that's too much of a mountain, I'll never get there. And just like letting it go. And that's where most people fail. They get information, but they don't, apply it. So we want to change. We think we should, but we just don't seem to commit. We just don't quite know how to make that next step.
Do you have a specific example, Roberta, that maybe you wouldn't mind sharing on knowing something and taking time to kind of make your way through these three stages?
Yeah, so for my share today, my thought was on something that I dealt with a lot most of my life. Ever since I can remember, I felt depressed. I had like severe depression when I was in my teens, or just in my upper teens. A doctor diagnosed me as clinically depressed, and he said you would have to take medication the rest of your life. Well, even at that age, there was something inside of me that didn't agree with that. But at the time, I didn't really have any other tools or knowing or resources, so I took the medication, and then it was, we're taught to say I have depression, when actually, if I identify as someone who has depression, it's really hard to disidentify from that belief, and I just can then go down that road of just kind of being a victim to having depression, like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I happen to have this quote illness or whatever they wanted to call it at that time, that diagnosis. And so then when my children came along, and I just realized I didn't want to show them that life of disempowered feeling of just like, I can't do life. I can't get out of bed. I can't seem to get where I know that I'm capable of going, because my brain would always give out and I would always get back into depression and despair and hopelessness. So that was a real huge like feeling of, I want to be different for my children. I want to show up different in the world to give them a different legacy, so to speak. And then the ultimate identity was taking charge of these different areas that I needed to change in my life. One of them was a huge factor was the holistic nutritional part, that my brain needed to be healed nutritionally, physiologically, which got me into my holistic health work. And of course, during a lot of that time, I was always doing mindset changes and working on myself. And I ended up in different 12-step programs to shift that mindset, to empower myself to get out of the victim thinking of just being someone who's depressed and can't do anything about it. And so over the years, I've just embodied these different areas and worked really hard on changing my thought process and my mindset, and working with Peter Sage in the work that Tish and I are, certified in. That was a huge quantum leap forward for me, because I had spent a lot of years making progress, but this made a huge amount of progress forward. And now today I can truly say that I do not identify as someone with depression. Like, it's just not who I am anymore. And I really feel that it's been, completely overcome.
So this was like an example of almost the opposite, when, having talked to the doctors and not knowing or not having any further knowledge about it, you almost embody that identity instantly. So it becomes an instant change of, this is who I am. So you jump right away to kind of stage 3, versus, as you started to educate yourself and learn about what depression is and personal development, you started to kind of reverse that in choosing not to be a person that identifies with depression, but instead to start at level 1 and knowing that there are better ways. There are things that you can do about this. This isn't a permanent condition. And then an emotional attachment in your children, and wanting to, again, promote change further in assisting yourself with the depression, and then eventually identifying and being a person who no longer has this, and being a healthy identity, a healthy person, both in mind and body. Is there any specific tips that you think, like now, especially when we're talking about mindset, that you might share as well, in how you kind of moved through those stages, specifically in your depression, and just working on your mindset specifically? What kind of thoughts changed?
Well, I think one thing that really strikes me when you say that is, that awareness is everything. They say awareness is everything, and really waking up to that intuition inside when you know that something doesn't feel good in your life and you know that this is not giving you a dynamic life. It's not something you're proud of. It's not something you want to keep. To really listen into that voice. Don't just get distracted by the outer world and by, chaos and busyness and one crisis after another, but to really listen to that intuition and know that, you can have a better path forward. And so that was one thing that I had to become aware of what was really happening, listen to my intuition, and then, know that there's, so many resources out there. It just was a matter of, grabbing onto something and to continue this, understanding, this awareness, and keep seeking out, the next step.
We've talked in a few of our episodes so far, our discussions about the connection between mind, body, and spirit. And I think what you just said there, in that you're listening to your intuition, that's our spirit, and just how connected these things are in transforming our identity and our change. That first it starts with this like yearning. We all know that we need to seek out information because of something that's talking to us sort of from the inside out. And we have talked about that too, and how our inner world kind of projects things into our outer world in previous discussions as well. I think it's important, especially under mindset. Our tip here is really that if you're trying to move from a stage, if you're trying to move out of an intellectual level of knowing something, we can start moving towards identity by changing our thoughts and our mindset. And specifically, our tip for this category is like things like affirmations, saying things over and over again, embodying that identity of I am, whatever it is that you want to make into your change. I am a healthier person. I am a person who is calm. I am a whole bunch of things, for Roberta and I, we are entrepreneurs is some of the mindset changes. We are infinitely powerful are some of the affirmations that we've practiced over the years in order to reprogram our brains into a new identity, into creating habits that give sustainable change. And we kind of talk about that, if we want to talk about science language, is neural conditioning. Hopefully I'm saying it right. In order to reprogram ourselves. So that's our tip for empowerment is, first of all, know your three levels, become familiar with those three, and then start with your mindset in reprogramming yourself. The language that we use in that I am somebody who suffers from, say, something like depression or a disease is much more empowering than I have it, or I am even like a diabetic or something like that. Those are identities versus, somebody that might have some power over what's happening to their body. And that kind of leads us then into our next topic, which is living healthy. Changing things, like we said, is much harder if you're in a consistent emotional state. So we want to make sure that we differentiate between finding an emotional attachment, but not staying in a high emotional state. None of this is meant for us to, or to encourage you to should on yourself, or to get down and, bring more stress to your body. That isn't what we mean by level 2 or an emotional attachment. It's something that is like a motivator versus something that's going to kind of keep you stuck. So when we talk about the body, in that first level, you need to, for example, for me, I wanted to be somebody who is more healthy. So we all know that sleep, exercise, improved nutrition, a good majority of us, and I certainly spent my life there earlier on before I had kids in that level 1 stage of understanding and knowing that all of these things are good for me, but that didn't mean that I did them. And that mostly was because I didn't have an emotional attachment. For me, I moved into level 2 when I had kids. So first off, being pregnant, I wanted instantly, now I have a need and a desire to feed my baby and my body better. So I started eating more vegetables. and moving into that level 2 of understanding in order to facilitate change through an emotional motivator. I also wanted to be a good role model for them and be able to teach them. I knew that, do what I say, not what I do wasn't going to work. So I needed to really embody these changes for myself too, in order for my children to be healthier. And then lastly, I slowly made this my identity over time. So we want to make sure that we point out that you can make change in quantum leaps. But for a good majority of us, sometimes it takes time to reprogram yourself. In order for these things to become your identity, this level 3, this is really becoming part of your subconscious. So for me, in my example, it started with slowly changing different recipes, getting rid of sugars more and more in my diet, some of those other tips that Roberta has given us before in complex carbs, etc., so that eventually I can identify with I'm a healthy eater. I eat healthy the majority of the time. And there are easy things that I can pass up that I know that it's not worth it. I pick and choose the treats that I might indulge in from time to time. But definitely going from level 1 where I started and I ate French fries at every restaurant I was in, that was like the only thing I ate, and avoiding vegetables like the plague, to becoming somebody who is a role model for my children and eats healthy the majority of the time.
Yeah, and I think with the the focus for myself is to consistently want to change in mind, in body, and in soul. Like that's, I think that's living life fully. If I, why would I resist changing my mind to more empowered and, not depressed and not anxious? Like I've learned how to shift my mindset in a way that creates lasting change, but that's my life journey. So it's not something that I dip my foot in and then make the change and get 100% and then go back out again into a different realm. It's like, it's just the way of life. It just becomes who I am. If I want, that dynamic life and having abundance in all these areas, or, feeling healthy and inspired and energized and, happy about life, this is my path. There isn't a quick fix where we just change and then we can go back to a different way. Of course, we want to stay on a path of moving forward. There's no really other direction to go if we want that abundant life. So that mindset of just being consistent means I'm just going to show up for life every day and do what life is calling for in these realms so that I can get that life I love. And it continues to unfold. So I get, some of it ongoing, and it's an ongoing process. So, and it doesn't have to be something we resist because it is a process, because everything in life is a process. So we're either by default putting our energy into something that's leading us down the path we don't want, whether that's ill health or feeling like we don't like what we see in the mirror, or feeling like we're not living our truth and not living authentic, but we're pleasing everyone else around us. So there's so many things we could be doing with our time, energy, and resources that are going to keep us stuck and actually cause us to further go downhill in those areas. Or we can take that same time, energy, and resources and, choose an empowering path. And so when I think of the identity part, it's just a part of who I am to go forward and be this person who is totally transformed. That's my life. That's what I do. That's what I love. And we can, that would be the ideal for all of us, to have that same, focus and wanting to live in expansive and in fully, embodied state of who we were created to be.
I think what you're saying is important in kind of making that distinction between, I'm sure, especially in your practice, for as far as nutrition goes, a lot of people, when they come to you, your customers, they know that they need to do better. They're looking, and might even be at level 2, where they have an emotional reason to want to make this change for one reason or another, either to reduce suffering and pain in their lives, or potentially for somebody else that they care about who has, asked for them to be present and work on their health with them. But until this really becomes an identity for this person, I imagine that there's kind of this back and forth of like they know, and almost a frustration from a practitioner's point of view, where they know what they're supposed to do. They even have some feelings and some emotional motivation behind it. But until they really embody a person who eats healthy, and that this is a lifelong change that they are committed to, they're not at level 3 yet.
Right. And then it's almost like that self-judgment is always there. Like, I'm not doing good. I'm just going to quit. I'm really not cut out for this. Or I don't know if this is going to help me. So we just tell ourselves a lot of stories around disempowerment and also, not getting the life we want. I have had several clients who quit maintaining their health at this level and then have gotten different health issues that have come up. And so we just have to understand that, yeah, it should be joyful. It should be, even though there's some effort involved, of course, life is effort. So if I don't take this empowering path, I'm going to have way more effort and struggle in life than if I do, first of all. So it's definitely not harder than life without empowerment, without these resources and abilities to transform. So absolutely, if people will just find some understanding and joy, like loving ourselves into this transform path has become such a focus of mine, not getting down on myself when I have a hard day or, thinking I'm just going to revert back. This doesn't work, but just consistently choosing that that I can get to that destiny that I'm looking for. And it's just one day at a time, but maintaining an attitude of joyfulness at some level or empowerment, and not just giving up on myself. I think that's been a huge part of it.
Awesome. So our live healthy tip, if I can kind of roll that part up, is to look for an emotional attachment so that you can move from just a mindset and a knowing level of understanding into level 2 that has an emotional level of understanding behind it. And then pick small practices. So we don't want to say you can't jump right to identity because that is entirely possible. But for the majority of us, just taking slow, graceful changes within your life will help you reprogram yourself, because that's really what you're looking to do here again, is in making lasting change, you're reprogramming your subconscious in order to make this really part of your identity, to be part of who you are, that you are a person who does this. And that leads us really well into our last section, which is live free or soul. And really, as we've kind of alluded to already, level 3 of understanding here is embodying these changes as your identity. You are incorporating whether your habits or a way of thinking or whatever the change is into your authentic self, into your spiritual self. The resistance is gone, and there's like a freedom that comes once you embody these identities, especially for positive change in your life. So you really are living free, which is our version of soul, that when you have this identity. So, in my example of making healthier choices, I am a healthy person now. The majority of the time I'm thinking about it all the time, and I don't have to. It's not, oh, I would really prefer the French fries when I go to a restaurant. I'm now looking for the healthier options. Not to say again that I don't ever eat French fries, but I'm looking for the healthier. That's now incorporated in who I am. It's not a yuck feeling of picking healthy or forcing myself to do that because I have it as an identity. So it's now embedded into my subconscious, into my soulful, spiritual self.
I
And
was just thinking of, when you were commenting that, I've never met anyone who says, I want to stay stuck in this difficult part of my life, or I want to stay unhealthy, or I want to stay tired, I want to stay depressed. Everybody wants this vibrant, healthy life. It's just that we don't always believe it's possible because there's all these, wrong programmings in our mind. But as we have these frameworks, we can start getting some momentum, getting some oxygen into our system of possibility. And really the transformation work that we do is what, has got us to this point. And we're so thrilled to live that and to share that, because we couldn't share it if we weren't living it. We have to walk the walk, and it's so empowering to help other people to come up to a higher level in their life. Because yeah, there's no one who's ever regretted it. That, that identity shift is super powerful.
And even, I guess, really like the actionable steps. That was one of the things, kind of as a side note that brought me to this work and actually embodying this change. Because as I've talked about before, I was reading books. I was, still really at that level 1 of so many things. Understanding these 3 levels and how to move from just knowing something and then how to apply that so that it becomes who you are has been transformational in itself. In that now I know how to move from one thing to another. I know how to make these changes in my life. And hopefully that's the value that we're giving to anybody that's listening here in our discussions as well, that here's how, here's like a step by step, a level system that you can assess for yourself where you're at for these changes, and know how to make them permanent within your lives, to know how to make them part of who you are. And we specifically want to relate that back. Our very first discussion, we talked about living your dream life. So ultimately, if you want to live your dream life, you need to become the identity of the person who lives that life. What are their habits? Who does that person look like? And we want to encourage you to kind of maybe go back, if you did the work in the first discussion and dreamed up your life. Now look at it from this point of view, from these three levels of understanding. And how do you make yourself be the person that lives that? How do you embody that dream life as who you are? So our final tip here for living free is that if you want to make these permanent changes, you want to make it to level 3 of understanding anything in your life, then it's neural conditioning that you really need to work on. It's reprogramming yourself. That's what we're talking about in making lasting change, so that you believe you are a person who does this, whether it's I am a non-smoker, I am a healthy eater, I have a healthy mindset. I was trying to think of the empowering wording for the opposite of depressed. I have a healthy mind. I am happy and joyful. Okay. Then Roberta's going to introduce here a video from Peter that talks about the science.
Yeah, what we want to share today is our tip for identity is to invite you to watch this free video that we're going to post along with our presentation here. And he talks about the science of the brain and how it works and why we do what we do and why we don't do what we know we should do. And it's just a very profound understanding of how the human mind works. And he refers to it as engaged neural programming or engaged neural conditioning, meaning we do it over time. It's programming, it's conditioning. It's something like we've been conditioned our whole life to think a certain way. And now we can change that conditioning and create a new way of thinking and being. But it's so fascinating to not just hear about it, but to really watch him dig into the depths of how we function and why we do what we do. It's just fascinating. It's something I think you'll truly love and truly get value out of just by watching the video itself.
So to conclude our 3 tips today, we really talked about the levels of understanding. One being just knowing something, having the facts, having learned it. 2 is having an emotional motivation for change. And then the third part is really embodying whatever that change is as your identity. So in order to help you do that under your mindset or living empowered, we're suggesting that you decide what those identities are and then practice them. Start reprogramming yourself by saying affirmations, by consistently picking habits that you can keep doing over time. With the body and our live healthy, if you need to, find that emotional attachment so that you can move to level 2. So it's not just blanket knowledge now, you have an emotional attachment to it. And again, still picking small practices to reprogram yourself over time. And finally, if you really want to know what we mean by embodying this as an identity and the science behind neural conditioning, then we invite you to watch a video that we'll post here, an attachment by Peter, in explaining exactly what that means and how your brain works.
Yeah, it's excellent. Thank you, Tish. And I guess our quote that would kind of wrap up and sum up this whole experience is life mastery is really about self-mastery, and knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. Is there anything else that you wanted to share, Tish?
No, I think that's it. Just a reminder, we do have our workshop tomorrow, so we will attach that one more time. And we hope you guys, start thinking about the identities that you want to embark on. Start taking in our tips and moving towards change, because it's so worth it. Living a life of your dreams and of intentional identity is so much more joyful than being in a life that where you feel restricted and stuck.
Yeah, for sure. And we just want to thank you for your time and spending that time with us today. And if there's someone that would benefit from this, we invite you to share it. to anyone. And if, of course, leave any comments or questions, we are always willing and available to answer any questions you might have on this journey of transformation.
See you next week.